Good day everyone. My name is Mark V. Lucilio, a second-year student of Negros Oriental State University, currently studying Bachelor of Science in Criminology. And for today's video, I'm going to report about institutional-based correction as a fulfillment in our subject CA 200 under the instructory of Mrs. Jill Rose P. Ador. First, let's talk about its overview. Severe overcrowding, pre-trial detainees, high death tolls, vigilant justice, corruption, history of prison, different types of prison, religion's role in prison. So, 5 facts about the Philippines incarceration system in the Philippines. First is the severe overcrowding. When we say severe overcrowding, it is the high populated area in that particular place. So, during the Duterte's election, it led to the infamous war on drugs and eventually overcrowded prisons, and this led to illness and death tolls to prisoners. So, during the election, when President Rodrigo Roa Duterte was elected as a president in the Philippines, he implemented war on drugs. As a result, many criminals caught by police, and it brings to overcrowded in Manila City Jail and or all over jails in the Philippines. So this picture was caught in Manila City Jail. As we can see, many prisoners in that area, overcrowding place. Manila City Jail, also known as Old Bilibid Prison. Manila City Jail, the largest jail in the Philippines, is split into dorms that safely house 170 inmates. Currently, these dorms house around 500 people. Similarly, a room designated for 30 people holds about 130 in the Quezon City Jail. So, also this picture is also one of the jail in the Philippines, one of the most largest jail in the Philippines, the Quezon City Jail. Quezon City Jail is located in Quezon City, northeast from Manila, Philippines, in the National Capital Region or NCR. It reports to the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology or the BJMP. It was built for 800 inmates, but with 3,800 prisoners, it is filled 5 times more than planned. So, this jail was built for only 800 inmates, but for now it was being occupied about 3,800 prisoners. So, the Quezon City Jail is very overcrowding jail. Next is the pre-trial detainees. Refers to detaining of an accused person in a criminal case before the trial has taken place, either because of a failure to post bail or due to denial of release under a pre-trial detention statute. According to the World Prison Brief, 75.1% of incarcerations within the Philippines incarceration system are pre-trial, and many people are serving sentences without conviction. Pre-trial detention is found in judicial system all over the world. In countries like the Philippines, people may serve time that outweighs their crimes. On average, prisoners in the Philippines are detained for 9 months without being sentenced. So, Philippines is one of the most high out rate of prisoners who were being detained. So this is the pre-trial detainees in the Philippines from year 2005 to 2018. Next is the high death tolls. The number of deaths resulting from a particular cause, especially an accident, battle, or natural disaster. About 5,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid prison due to overcrowding, dirty living conditions, inmate violence, lack of nutritional food, and basic health care. So, as a result of overcrowding prisons, 5,200 inmates die annually, so meaning the prisons is very overcrowding, which result to lack of nutritional and lack of nutritional food, basic health care, and dirty living. So this picture is a picture in New Bilibid prison in Manila. Outbreaks of pulmonary tuberculosis. So this outbreak of pulmonary tuberculosis can be passed to one person to another person. So if a particular jail is being overcrowded, the pulmonary tuberculosis can easily be transmitted to another person. Poor living condition. Lacks of nutritional food. So as we can see, the food that prisoners eat is being so next is vigilant justice. The action of a single person or group of people who claim to enforce the law but lack the legal authority to do so. So when we talk about vigilant justice, it refers to a person who put the law in his hands. So for example, a particular officer in New Bilibid prison, has take his power to act illegal to a particular inmate. So that officer may give violence to that inmate. Duterte's war on drugs escalated during his presidency. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill anyone suspected of dealing, buying, or using drugs. This was one of few ways for some people to make money. Many homeless and impoverished people joined the vigilant teams. So this so many homeless people joined the vigilant teams because of lack of money. So the Philippines police force and unidentified gunmen have killed 7,000 known drug dealers and users since Duterte's presidency in 2016. The Philippines war on drugs has created the belief that extrajudicial violence and murder are necessary to fight crime. So this picture is extrajudicial violence. As we can see, the death of a person and the name, no name, drug lord ako, talamak na user. So another crime is murder. So next is the corruption in dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. So inmates could live like kings. Inmates could live like kings for a fee. The information led to further allegation. Prison workers and officials were taking bribes to bring and distribute contraband to inmates. The contraband in question included cigarettes, cell phones, and televisions. Supposedly, inmates can also pay for a person, cooks, and nurses. So, when we talk about inmates could live like kings, this refers to those inmates who has lot of money, or shall we say a drug lord. They can hire their cook and private nurses in prisoners, and also they can give fee to officers in the jail to bring cigarettes, cell phones, or even television. So that's one of the corruption and most major problems in the Philippines, the corruption system, and it is really happening in our country, and it is being used in the television. Inmates who cannot afford a better life within the prison are stuck in overcrowded and dirty rooms. These inmates have a higher rate of becoming ill and of death. Now that the corruption has been unearthed, officials are taking steps to weed it out, one prison at a time. So those persons, or those inmates who don't have enough money, or shall we say neutral inmates, they were being stuck in an overcrowded prisons, and it it may lead to them up to become ill or getting disease, and as a result for further, they will be in higher rate of being dead. So this picture is showing corruption in in prison. History of prison. From the birth of modern civilization in 3rd millennia BC, almost every major ancient civilization used concept of prisons as a means to detain and remove personal freedoms of incarcerated people. So in those early periods of history, prisons were often used as a temporary stopgap before sentencing to death or life of slavery. But as time went on and our civilization developed, prisons started morphing into correctional facilities that started implementing the concept of rehabilitation and reform of prisoners. In addition of holding convicted or suspected criminals, prisons were often used for holding political prisoners, enemies of the state, and prisoners of war. So different types of prisons. First is the prison ward. As when we say prison ward, it holds majority of inmates, general population, often separated in several sections connected with a heavily secured passageway. So next is isolation cell, segregation unit for violent, unruly, and vulnerable prisoners that needs to be separated from the rest of the prison's population. So the isolation cell, uh, those inmates who were being in who were being imprisoned to these isolation cells are those people of violent, unruly, and vulnerable prisoners that may lead to danger to other prisoners in the jail. So, as a they they separated those violent person or inmate. Safe cells. These safe cells in which prisoners are kept under the constant visual observation is used mostly for suicidal prisoners. So safe cells, these these cells were those inmates who have planned to have suicide. Conventional prisons intended to hold sentenced criminals and prisoners awaiting death sentence. Military prisons. So these prisons which hold prisoners of war, unlawful combatants, and persons that are deemed to be a national risk. So military prisons, the the person or the prisoners who will going to be prison in these military prisons are those who have risk in our national, or shall we say risk in the Philippines. For example, the New People's Army or the rebel of the country. So political prison that hold persons that are considered to be traitors to the nation political system. So it's very self-explanatory. Political prison, those person who betray our national political system. Psychiatric prisons can be found at some psychiatric hospitals that hold criminally insane patients that suffer from some type of mental disorder. Next is the concentration camps have been used the length of Second World War by the Nazi regime to contain and eventually exterminate unwanted individuals of different race and nationality. Next is the ancient prisons, which often use its prisoners as slaves. Sometimes they were sentenced to a life of slavery as a physical workers of Galilee slaves, and some were given the chance to win their freedom from their slave training camps or ludus by the competing in arenas like gladiators. So, Asian prisons, as of now, Asian prisons were no longer being used because we were being modernized country. So, this Asian prisons talks about the Asian times in which even if a person has no crime committed, he or she still need to be imprisoned because he or she will become slaves of a particular person or a slave. So religion's role in prisons in the Philippines. Under federal law, a prison or jail cannot substantially burden a prisoner's exercise of his or her religion unless it can demonstrate that it has a compelling interest that cannot be achieved through any other less restrictive means. The law protects these rights for good reason. So, as we can see in this picture, inmates in the prisoners holding rosary and Bible. Religion's value in prison is often about its contribution to the individual growth or development of a particular inmate. The focus is to perceive role of religion in helping lower the chances of recidivism among inmates. It also focuses on the immediate value that religions have for inmates through their help and their coping and survival. So the influence and practice of religion in the correctional setting is as old as the history of prisons. Initial entry of religion into prison was probably carried out by the religion men who themselves were imprisoned. So the Bible stories of such prisoners include Joseph and Jeremiah in the Old Testament, and the John the Baptist, Peter, John, and Paul in the New Testament. Beginning in the days of Constantine, the early Christian church granted by asylum to criminals who would otherwise have been mutilated or killed. Although this custom was restricted in most countries by the 15th century, releasing prisoners during Easter time and requests by church authorities to pardon or reduce sentence for offenders remained for centuries, with the latter still in existence in a modified form. So these are the effects of religion to prisoners in their life. Next is imprisonment under church jurisdiction became a substitute for corporal or capital punishment. In medieval times, the Roman Catholic Church developed penal techniques later used by secular states such as monastic cell that serve as a punishment place for criminal offenders. So during the medieval time, the Roman Catholic Church developed several penal techniques that later used by secular states. So this is one of the techniques used in the medieval time. A very important reason why inmates become involved with religion is to improve their own self-concept. Lack of positive self-concept is a common problem with correctional inmates who may suffer from guilt related to failures in life, remorse from criminal acts, or from the pain of a dysfunctional family background. So, it our religion has a big role in a prisoner's self. It helps them to have a positive self-thinking or positive self-concept, and helps them became to have a new life. In Rome, what are now the Sisters of the Good Shepherd built correctional facilities for women, and in 1703, Pope Clement VI built the famous Michael Prison as a house of correction for younger offenders with separation, silence, work, and prayer emphasized. As late as the 18th century, the Vatican prison still served as a model prison designed for Europe and America. During early settlers of North America brought with them the customs and common laws of England, including the pillory, the stocks, and the whipping post. During the 18th century, isolating offenders from fellow prisoners became the accepted correctional practice. So it was thought that long-term isolation combined with in-depth discussion with clergy would lead inmates to repent for becoming penitent, sorry for the sins. So it is in this slide it shows the important role of religion in prisoners. So thus the term penitentiary was derived. West Jersey and Pennsylvania Quakers were primarily responsible for many of the prison's reforms. They developed the idea of substituting imprisonment for corporal punishment and combining the idea of the prison with the workhouse. So the prototype of this regime was the Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia, that in style reflected the Quakers' belief in man's ability to reform through reflection and remorse. So even during the 19th century, when daytime work was initiated by the Auburn system, the solitary confinement at night was still the norm in correctional practice. The first solitary confinement was thought to serve the same repenting purpose as the older penitentiary. So next is belief in education as a tool for reducing criminal activity also assisted in the growth of religion in prison. Because of the limited budgets of correctional institutions, the chaplains were often called upon to be the soul of educator in many American prisons. So next is the schooling often consisted of the chaplain standing in a dark corridor with a lantern hanging from the cell bars while extolling the virtues of repentance. So this is also a effect of effect of religion in prisoners. So and next is volunteers also have a long history in corrections that can be traced back to the beginning of prisons in the last 200 years. Many religious groups have entered correctional facilities to provide religious service to inmates. So next is we talk about the different glossary terms used in correction. First is the absconder. So absconder refers to any offender under the supervision of the South Dakota Parole Service whose services whose whereabouts are unknown to the supervising parole agent. This includes an offender's flight, attempt to relocate to another area, or the evasion of parole supervision by the offender by not reporting to their assigned parole agent. An offender is considered an absconder once effort to locate the offenders have been exhausted and failed. So next, AWOL or absent without leave. It is common to us the failure of a juvenile to return to a facility from approved leave. So, for example, a police officer didn't return to its work for didn't didn't return to its work for almost 1 month without leave. The, it it is considered as an AWOL. Abuse. Any or failure to act by the employee of a juvenile correction facility or by a contract person or entity providing services to a juvenile corrections facility which act was performed or was failed to be performed knowingly, recklessly, or intentionally, and which cause or may have caused injury or death to an individual in the custody of care of a juvenile corrections facility. Next is the adjudicated delinquent. Any child 10 years of age or older who, regardless of where the violence occurred, was found by a court to have violated any federal, state, or local law or regulation for which there is a penalty of a criminal nature of an adult, except state or municipal hunting, fishing, boating, park, or traffic laws that are classified as misdemeanors or petty offenses. Next is the administrative detention, a temporary form of separation from general population. Inmates may be placed in administrative detention when their continued presence in the general population may pose a threat to life, property, self, staff, or others to security or discipline operation of the institution. In juvenile corrections, administrative detention is not exceeded 24 hours, excluding weekends and holidays. Adult or Reentry Program, an institutional-based program consisting of intensive case management, cognitive behavior programs, job assistance programs, and money management for offenders based on high risk for offending inmates who meet the following criteria will qualify for this program. First is male inmates with a LSI score of 30 or above and age of 30 or below. or female inmates with a LSI score of 23 or above. So next is the assessment. A more detailed interview of a juvenile offender and a review of his or her available medical, mental health, and chemical dependency records and other pertinent information by a professional meeting the state's criteria for licensing and education in the respective field. So next is the attempt to locate or ATL. An attempt to locate or ATL may be issued to local law enforcement by a supervising parole agent. When a parole's whereabouts is unknown and efforts are underway to locate the parole, the ATL may be issued prior to considering the parole an absconder. Attorney of record. So, an attorney of record who has appeared in court, signed or received pleadings or other forms of on behalf of an inmate client or who has filed a letter of representation with a particular institution where the inmate resides. The attorney remains the attorney of record until another attorney of the client substitutes for him or her. He or she is allowed by the court to withdraw or the case is closed. Bedside visit. The act of an inmate visiting an immediate family member that has been seriously injured and receive emergency medical care of or a family member that is suffering from a serious illness who is under the care of a physician or a family member who has a terminal illness and that is imminent. Bloodborne pathogen. Bloodborne pathogens include any of a family of pathogenic microorganisms that are present in and may be transmitted by human blood, including hepatitis and HIV. The pathogens are primary concern the human immunodeficiency virus or HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. So, why maybe you were wondering why this blood-borne pathogen include in this correction glossary term. So, this blood-borne pathogen is included in correction glossary terms because we talk about correction. So when we say correction, it refers to a particular place, which is the prisons who were being. So in the prison, it includes prisoners with overcrowded people. So and these bloodborne pathogens can be transmitted to other person that may lead to death. Body alarm. A wireless device issued to staff and individuals prior to entering the secure perimeter of an adult dock facility that clips to the belt of pants and emits a loud alarm when activated by a pull chain. So, case management risk level. A level of risk established by the LSI-R risk. Age, release plan, and or release type, which is used to determine a minimum number of contacts a case manager will have with an offender during a time frame. Next is judgment. A certified statement signed by a judge that sentenced an inmate to a term in prison, also referred to as judgment, conviction, order, sentence, or commitment papers. Judgment. A certified statement. Next is legal file. The legal file is maintained by central records for each inmate to contain sentencing documents, criminal history, date calculation, worksheets, audit log, presentation, even investigation, PSI. psychosexual evaluation, hold, detainer notification request, fingerprint palm, print cards, physical description, parole documents, birth certificate, social security cards, driver's license, and other identification documents. In service training, any training obtained during the course of employment that provides the employee with additional knowledge or skill relevant to the performance of their duties. Next is the interdisciplinary PACE program, IDPP, a structured PACE system designed collaboratively by the IDT to keep inmates safe during incidents when they choose to engage in self-injurious behaviors. The next is technical violation. It refers to the failure of a parolee to comply with any of the conditions listed on his or her supervision agreement, or the failure of an offender to comply with any special conditions imposed by the Board of Pardons and Paroles and or the supervising parole agent. So that would be all. Thank you.